In one of his famous poems titled Ode on the Grecian Urn, John Keats, the English romantic poet, says, heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. When I look at the situation in India, through the lines of John Keats, I think that I had better edited it. If to describe the Indian situation, I should say, heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are the harshest. Those unheard are the harshest. Why should I say so? Because history has two sides. One is the side of the version given by the conquerors or the perpetrators of evil. They are the first people who come up with a detailed account of things that happened in a particular place or in a particular time or in a particular situation. Then years pass until the victims come back. When the victims emerge, when the victims resurface themselves and speak the reality, then only you get the complete history of what is what and which is which. The victim knows it better than the perpetrators of evil. When we look at the story of the Indian religions, especially the Hindu religion, as I told you, whether there is one at all is a matter of a dispute. I'm not going to go into that now. Let us take there is a religion now called or known as the Hindu religion. Years ago, I mean centuries ago, when the Western world went to India, well, their interest was only commercial interest. And in order to establish the commercial interest unquestioned, they turned to what is called invasion. That's the reason. They didn't want to give any benefit to India at all. I don't think it was for imparting India with any benefit that the Westerners invaded that subcontinent. And then, along with them came when the Christian missionaries, or I should say, unknowingly, the Western invasion opened the way of Christianity into the Indian subcontinent. And the Christians, as well as to the ruling classes, whether they carried much of the Christian values or not, I don't know, because persecution is not a matter of Christian value. It is not anywhere in the Christian value. If the ruling class of the Europeans who ruled Britain had any sense of Christian value, they would not have persecuted the poor slaves the way in which they did it. Okay, let us leave that part of the story aside. The people with scientific thinking or humanitarian concerns or philosophical bent of mind or Christian values, they found that every practice that the people in India observed under the pretext of the religion or as a religion was number one, pagan, number two, prehistoric, number three, absolutely unscientific, number four, terribly cruel, number five, against humanitarian concepts or ideas, and finally, absolutely unapplicable in a growing civilized world. So they didn't try to go on the line of them becoming one of those fellows, but instead, because they had the iron fist, with iron fist, they rode roughshod. They rode roughshod on every religious practice of the Indian people. Well, do I agree with or not? That's another thing. I don't agree with anybody persecuting anybody at all. That's another thing. But a few things, you have but to apply your iron fist. For example, in the last video, I told about sati. What is sati? If a husband dies, well, according to the Hindu religious belief, his body should be burnt on a funeral pyre. Then the question, what happens to the widow, the lady left behind? Well, she should jump herself voluntarily. She should jump into the same fire and commit suicide. Suppose she doesn't, then the people will drag her into the fire. And if she tries to run away, they would take a long lance and they will pierce it through her body. And she had to stand burning in the fire. Let me ask you one thing. Is there any logic in it? Is it logically consistent? Number two, has it got an existential relevance? Can this thing be permitted to exist anywhere in the world? Anywhere in the world. If a society practices it as a great ritual or as something absolutely, I should say, metaphysical, what could you call such society? I'm not going to give any name, though I know a couple of words in the English language that would appropriately suit to that practice. I'm not going to give any of those words. Okay, so what could they call them? And these great think tanks, this great mystic religion, this great religion of ahimsa, non ahimsa, tolerance, great ahimsa, don't kill anybody. Didn't they practice it? Did it ever occur to anybody that this is against the person's right to live? We have no right to take away a person's right to live unless that person has not committed anything so damaging and serious to mankind. Look at the poor widow. What has she committed? What has she committed? Well, the religious hierarchy has many accusations to turn against her, to tell against her. I'm not going into the details of it because that doesn't profit. Until one Englishman, the Governor General of British India, whose name was William Bentinck, he abolished it with law on the 4th of December 1824. On the 4th of December. Does the world celebrate it anywhere? I should say that was the greatest, the strongest, the most courageous step towards women's emancipation. The strongest movement the world has ever seen towards women's emancipation. Has it ever been celebrated in the diaspora anywhere in the world or anywhere in that date? You'll have to check it into the internet, into the Google to see, or some history book to see when it happens. Look, once it came into existence, the ban came into existence through iron fist. But that doesn't mean people immediately stopped practicing it. No, for generations to come, it went on being practiced. Even a couple of years ago, I had a news cut I had information from a newspaper saying that it was practiced. Okay. Now, when we look at the Hindu religious practices, there are two sides of it. Two sides of it. The first side of it is the side of the people who perpetuate evil. The other side is the side of the people who are victimized, who are the victims. Now, the problem is the perpetrators evil, they have a theology, they have a philosophy, they have some metaphysical concepts and some ideological framework and some intellectual, I should say, high grounds to establish the facts that these things are divinely necessary. That's the problem. These things are divinely necessary. So, if a person happens to be an outcast, which I told you the other day, if a person happens to be an outcast, he should not listen to the Vedas. If he happens to listen to the enchanting of Vedas, well, his ears should be blocked with molten lead being poured into it. And if he happens to chant mantras or Vedas, that means the holy text, then his tongue should be plugged out and it should be given to the crow as a beautiful dinner. Do you tell me? Do you tell me? What can you call it? What can you call it? Was that practiced in India? And then those people who are supposed to be outcast, they have no freedom to walk on the public roads. No freedom to walk on the public roads. Not only they had no freedom to walk on the public roads, they could not enter the premises of a temple. Because God is holy, yes, that part is agreed. And these people are unholy. And the unholy people can pollute the holy God. The unholy people can pollute the holy God. This is where you see the contrast. The holy God, the Almighty, came as a human being and lived with the unholy people. For what purposes? So that he could be unholy? No, so that he could make others holy. So it never occurred to the scholars, the think tanks, the philosophers, the theologians, and the mystics of the Hindu religion that these things should not be practiced until the Western rule came to India. They found that this could not be permitted because all these things held India in the dark ages as prehistoric pagans. All these things blocked Indians as prehistoric pagans, prehistoric pagans. So the Western world didn't give any respect at all to any of these things. That's why they passed every possible law to abandon or to stop, to ban a Hindu religious ritual, which was not against mankind. There are many things which are not against mankind. They go to the temple, worship the idol. It doesn't destroy anybody. They have their festivals and celebrations. Why not? Why not? They have legends and their beliefs. What's wrong? But the cruelties, the untold cruelties that they practiced against humanity at large had been crushed down by the Western people. And the tragedy is, later on, India got its freedom from the Western rule. Well, I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of the stalwarts of the Indian freedom movement. Yes, it's good that India got freedom. And so the things that the Western society, the Western governments, stopped in India itself, because in those days they lived in India and they knew how detrimental these evil practices were against the existence, growth, and survival of civilizations. That's why they stopped it, because they went, they saw it firsthand, without hearing stories. Yes, and they stopped it. But later on, the same literature, as Vedas or Upanishads or whatever it may be, got translated into Western languages and came into Western universities and Western societies and Western study circles and educational forums. So the Westerners, they studied the Hindu religion. But then, from which perspectives, or from what perspectives, from whose perspectives? Then the question, then the answer, well, who wrote these texts? The perpetrators of evil or the victims of the evil? Who wrote it? The perpetrators of evil or the victims of the evil? The perpetrators of evil wrote the textbooks. I should say, better wrote the great classic books. Who wrote? The perpetrators. And now, after the freedom movement, the Western society got an idea of Indian religions, not from the mouth of, not from the mouth of the victims, but from the mouth of the perpetrators of evil. So what happened? They thought it's a fantastic, it's a mystic, it's a marvelous, it is absolutely, I should say, terrific ideas, thoughts, understandings of what an ideological superiority. And very, very, I should say, very, very eloquent speakers of this religion, like Swami Vivekananda, came to the West and they impressed the Western world, impressed the Western world with the eloquence that they had, the eloquence they had, and the way in which they introduced what is called the mystic aspects of the Hindu religion. It was so fantastic that the listeners were flabbergasted. They saw it is marvelous. It is marvelous, beautiful, terrific. Oh, what a great ideal world of ideologies. That's how they wide opened the doors of the Western world to these practices which their fathers had once banned in India itself. So, unknowingly or not knowing the truth, but knowing the truth only from the side of the perpetrators of evil, not from the side of the people who suffered or the victims of it, the Western society opened their doors wide enough for these Indian religious practices to get established in the Western soil. Now the question, do I mean, do I mean that they should not have done it? No, I don't even remotely mean it. Then why should I make this remark, you may ask me? Well, the reason is simple. Before you remove a fence, as I told the last day, think twice about it. I have told you the experience or the confessions of Reverend David Haslam. So if you have studied it, if you have known it, what it is, then there were steps taken in a different direction. In what direction? That's a question. That's a question. X, Y, and Z. All these pagan practices, they ask a question. Do you still believe it? Is it part of your belief structure? If it is, well, we can't permit such things in the Western world because the Western world has grown up only because of modern science, Greek philosophy, and Christian values. These are the only three things that that I should say catapulted the prehistoric Western society, the pagan Western society, into what is called modernism today. Had it not been for these three things, India would not have been the India that we see today. It would not have been the same India that we see today. And now I'm going to look into some of the serious mistakes that has been made in the context. I believe I will be able to discuss that in the next session. Thank you very much.